If there was a store that was only open for 60 minutes out of the year, would you go to it? Do you think it would even stay in business with only 1 hour available? What would the business model even look like for such a store? This sounds crazy to describe. Every business advisor out there would tell you that a store needs to be available to people when the people are ready to purchase. Random last-minute birthday gifts, Mother's Day, of course, the lead up to the crazy end-of-year shopping season. Especially in the United States, we are used to stores being available nearly any time we want, and especially if you live in an urban center. I can't tell you how shocking it was to Francesco to consider grocery shopping at 10 p.m., even on a Sunday. And we aren't even talking about online shopping yet. But here's the spoiler. I'm not actually talking hypothetically. Because when you do the math, 60 minutes is roughly how long there is work available to purchase from Not Work Related's website over the course of the entire year. Because Sarah's incredible design-heavy work sells out in about 10 minutes. And the time-intensive nature of her designs means she and the Not Work Related team only do 6 stock drops on her website per year. 6 times 10 is 60. 1 hour available to shop. If this intro hasn't hooked you in just yet to sticking with us for part 2 of my conversation with Sarah of Not Work Related, let me just say this. The point of sharing this and so many other stories here on the Maker's Playbook podcast is to point out to you that there is no single right or wrong way to make this crazy dream of making a living from the things that you make actually work. Yes, that means you might have to try and possibly fail at some options before you figure out what works for you. But I hope, most of all, that it means as you listen to Sarah's story, you will be encouraged to find the solution that works for your life circumstances specifically. Because for me, when I think about 1 hour of shopping being what supports a full-time salary and a couple of assistants, plus studio rent and all the rest of the overhead, well, it's nothing short of a miracle. And that is some encouraging news to keep all of us going. So stick with us, friends, for this second half of my chat with Sarah from Not Work Related, right after this quick word from our sponsor.
Hello, I'm Jeff, Executive Vice President here at Amico Brent. Over 100 years ago, my grandfather founded Amico. Today, my brother and I carry on his legacy. Our team works diligently to bring you the best clays, glazes, equipment, and more for your studio and a classroom. This week's episode is brought to you by Amico Brent. Please find your favorite Amico or Brent product at your local distributor today. Thank you for choosing Amico for all your clay and glaze needs.
Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 13 years, Rebecca Ikes-Cara. Going back to the conversation on pricing, I was literally finishing my presentation for Ceramicon before we hit record, which is all about pricing. And what's really funny is that you were acknowledging the whole cost-based thing when you say like the cost of goods plus the cost of your time plus taxes equals the cost of the piece. And it was funny because I literally wrote in there, a few hours before you and I hit record, to put in the amount of your time being like, I'm stumbling around here. I was explaining how to figure out how to price your time, right? So like a lot of people, like how the heck do you figure
your hourly
out your
rate
hourly
or
rate?
how to, okay.
Right. So, which, there is fairly easy math to do with that in terms of what you want your salary to be, how many hours a week you're going to work, how many weeks out of a year, and that will inform your hourly rate. But what I was writing in this presentation, and I don't think I'm giving it away for anybody who's not, still go sign up for Ceramicon and all that jazz, was, number one, don't assume 52 weeks out of the year. you should take a vacation. But number two, I was putting in there as an example, not 40 hours a week, but more like 20 hours a week, because you're going to have to spend all of this other time, to your point, on unseen, invisible tasks, on the marketing, on the management, on the studio upkeep, on things that aren't making. And so you have to like account for less hours of making, or your hourly rate for making has to be higher, because for every hour of making, you're going to have, you know, an hour of studio upkeep or an hour of marketing or whatever it might be.
Looked at my way here. I looked at my little Toggle app for last week and worked like a little over 60 hours, and almost 40% of it was non-billable stuff. And right now I charge about 25% for that like overhead category, but that overhead includes also like my rent and stuff. Like it includes all of that, not just the time. At that point, it's like, that's, I think, the struggle that I'm having. Like, I would love for every piece to be $25, and I would love for things to be so accessible and affordable that anyone could have them. Because I hate thinking that I'm making work for just like, you know, people that are making like over 100K a year or something. But the numbers just don't work, at least for my work, right? Like, if you make a different style of ceramics, the numbers could work. And there's definitely people that sell $25 pieces that are totally fine. But for the like intricate sort of pain in the ass work that I make, plus taking into the fact that I'm running a full studio, I'm definitely undercharging. That's what I'm trying to say. Even though that there are times when there's like a $90 mug on there, there's like a $110 mug, I'm probably still undercharging. I'm making it work because I'm just working a lot of hours. But it sucks to see, like, I think when I was in school, I feel like there was an understanding, like, you don't get paid a lot for the arts, and you're like, no, I'm fine, I'm not in it for the money, I love this. And then you get out into the real world, and you're like, no, I love money, I don't love this. Like, it's not, because I think I talked a lot about money and running the business and thinking of this as a job in this, like, episode, and I'm not. In real life, I care way more about the work and way more about the design and way more about the technical sides of pottery, if you actually know. But the part that sucks about it is that it has to make money to exist. And like, when I say there's no money in this, there is genuinely no money in this. And everyone that does it is doing it out of like passion and love, because they could do so many other things. I told my assistant recently, she really wants one of them. She really wants to like be in ceramics. The other two are like, I'm good. I've seen enough, like, I don't want to do this. You can keep doing this and I'll come in, but like, I'm out. But one of them really wants to be in. I'm like, if you ever see a job for ceramics that's like 40 an hour or like 50 an hour divided out, you know, take that job. Yeah. You will get paid more at that job than you will doing your own art. And she's like, no, I'm not in it for the money. Like, I totally understand, but you still have to pay your bills. So right. The one way that I've gotten around being able to charge what I need to charge has been selling seconds, and it's something that I've tried to have more conversations with other people about, because I think historically it's been very controversial, right? And in some parts of the country or the world, it might be cheaper to have like a smash pile in the backyard than it is to like sell those pieces, photograph them, ship them, all of that. But it's allowed me, I think we sold like 250 pieces last year that were seconds, and that's a ton of money that can help fund the inefficiencies if I have to throw those all out.
It's also just a lot of waste.
It's a lot of waste. And there are people that can afford that seconds price that now are part of the game that, you know, otherwise couldn't play.
Angelique made a great point about this when we were talking about, you know, art with a capital A, right? Gallery art, like, and talking about the inaccessibility of so much of that, and how there's so many of us making the art who would love to support someone who don't have that bankroll, and how like having, her example was, you know, if somebody's doing installations and large scale pieces, having some small item that you can sell that somebody can, you know, who adores what you're making, can support you and feel like they've been a part of it, but also it's that $25, $30, $40, $50 thing instead of the $2,000 sculpture or whatever. But also, so I just connect those two things here. And I'm half hesitating to ask this question, but I'm kind of also fascinated, because I think you also have an incredibly high standard for what is a second. I have seen some of your posts and I've been like, Sarah, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Which is part of your design, right? Is part of your aesthetic, and you're like staying true to that and keeping true to, what people's expectations should be. So I totally respect that. But like, do you want to talk a little bit about like what actually makes a second?
In my world. In the real world, it's completely different. But in my world, like if there's like a dot of color or tinted slip over white glaze, a dot like the size of a pencil lead.
Yeah.
Second. If there's like a line that's not straight. Second. If you can see a touch up and it's textural. Second. Like I think part of it has come from Instagram. I don't think it would be so bad if it was like in-person sale. But because you're taking videos of the best case scenario of a piece, people will, in my opinion, expect that out of the thing that they receive. And so I would rather someone be like, dope, I got $5 off of this thing, or I got $7 off of this thing, and it looks perfect, than someone get something and be like, oh, like
Right.
She makes her work look so clean online, but then this thing that I got, it's like a little sloppy. Like, there are times, like, we make mistakes. Like, all of it is handmade. Things will have imperfections. But I would rather knock $5 off of something, $10 off of something, and hold myself to a higher standard than sneak something in that I'm like, I hope it's someone that doesn't know anything about ceramics that is going to receive, like that gives me more anxiety. I don't care about the $5. Like, it allows me.
I love that you specified some examples of a second, because I think a lot of people, when they think second, they're expecting 50% off or something drastic, when it can be a sliding scale like that. Like, it's, you're making it to where you're proud of what you're putting out at 100%. You can stand by it. People can't come at you for any reason, because it's literally perfect.
$85, like an $85 mod, that better be perfect, because that's a lot of money. Like, I'm not at all unconscious that this stuff is expensive, and that being able to, like, there are seconds that are 50% off. Like, a lot of the prototypes and stuff, and actually, this is like a great thing to bring up, but I wrote and did an interview for a piece in Dwell that I hope is going to come out at some point this year, and it's all about the beauty of prototyping, and it's about design, and it's about being able to buy people's ideas. Like, when you buy someone's prototype or you buy their experiment, you're like investing in that moment where they were like, let me try this. And it might become nothing, right? But you have their idea in that tiny bit of time that they spent making that thing. And that's really cool. Whether it becomes something else or it doesn't become something else, it's still very, very cool that you have like physical proof of someone going through the design process. And so I keep some prototypes, but a lot of them I sell. And if I don't like something, I'll mark it super cheap, because I know other people do like things that I don't like, and like everyone has different tastes. But the article, I think, should be whenever in the world it comes out. It should be really interesting, because I talk a lot about design too, and I talk about how design is iterative. And so if we try to be perfect every time we make something for the first time, like, we won't actually get anywhere. But if we throw out every single time we tried something and failed, then that's a waste too. And I submitted a piece for it, not my work, but it's an old Airware sample that I bought for like $10 at a sale. And I've kept it this whole time. And it's like representative of that whole thing. That piece never became a product, but I have it, and it's the only one. Yeah. I don't know. Selling seconds is cool.
I would even but like add on to design is iterative. I think life and business at large, to make a grand sweeping statement, is iterative, right?
Oh, 100%.
You see so many people asking these questions online, and this is part of why I started our community platform. But all of the, you get stuck in the analysis paralysis phase of, well, should I use this website platform or that website platform? Should I do this or should I do that? And it's like, at a certain point, you just gotta frickin' put yourself out there, try it, and when it doesn't work, change.
I think that the dream of not work related has changed so many times, and I will say that in 5 years, it probably won't look like this. And that's a good thing. Like, when I first started, I thought the dream was to get into stores, right? There's a bunch of really high-end, like, home goods stores in Brooklyn that I thought the people that made it were in those stores. Well, guess what? I got into those stores, made friends with those people, realized that they were all struggling because they were making these like high-end, high-quality goods, but they were making them at half cost. So like when I started pulling out of wholesale, it was right after I had like one of the biggest clients I've ever had, and they put in an order for like $4,500 of stuff. And I was like, I walked in and I was like, please drop me. And it was like my dream store. Probably had spent 2 or 3 years hoping I could get in there. And I walked in after the first order. They placed their second. And I was like, I can't do this. Please let me go. They're like, no, you can do whatever you want. You can do like 30 pieces. Like, we'll be super flexible. And I was like, I can sell this for $9,000 in like a second, right? And so I'm not everybody, and it doesn't apply to everybody again. But that was one phase of not work related. There was another phase where I thought that best case scenario would be that I make the same stuff all the time forever. And so all I have to do is update the website quantities. And then my shop updates are just like me typing numbers in instead of what it is now, which is like big overhauls of design and changing and new stuff all the time. That got so boring. Like, I don't want to make the same thing for 5 years, but I thought I did. And then there was another phase where when I first moved into my current studio, there's a very large, medium-sized ceramic studio in the same floor. And the owner of that studio, super nice and has been a great resource. She had grown the studio to a point where she didn't do any of the pottery, any of the ceramics anymore. I could tell by the way that she was dressed, she wore super nice clothes every day because she sat in front of a computer all the time. Yep. And I was like, okay, this is the point where she has 5 or 6 employees and she's back in an office not doing any of the production. And it was I felt like I learned a huge lesson in that first 6 months when I was there. Because I got to see what would happen when you keep growing and keep growing. Like, I'm already maybe 40% pulled away from the work. I still make all of it, which is why we don't make that much stuff at the studio. But the bigger you get, the less of that work you do. And it was a huge wake-up call to be like, oh no, I'm done. Like, I'm good with the size that I am. I'm good with a couple of assistants. I would rather keep the overhead manageable. And I want to keep my hands in clay. But I think people don't realize that until they get maybe a little too far. That doesn't mean that in 5 years I don't want it.
Sure, because life can change.
There's been so many iterations of this business. I think I said in the beginning of this podcast, I didn't even want to do this. Like, I love my job so much. It's such a perfect fit for my brain. The studio is an amazing thing that has been created out of nothing. But because I had been doing it part-time, I saw how hard it was. And so when people were like, when are you going to make the switch? I was like, I can't afford it. When I started full-time, I had like $5,000 in my bank account because I had been putting all of my money into student loans. So it's not like I saved money for 5 years being an architect. I went to an Ivy League school in New York City. Like, I paid loans for the 5 years after I graduated, and I kept $5,000 as a safety net, and everything else got shoved. So, like, I'm saying all that being like, you don't have to make that final plan now. Right. You can change next year, change your mind. You can change your prices. You can change your business structure. You can do whatever you want. It's your business. Yep. It's your time.
And that's the flexibility that's exciting. I think it's like a double-edged sword, right? I have this conversation with one of my closest friends in the photography world. Like, we're excited by the fact that we get to call all the shots and get to make any decisions, and there is flexibility. But then on the hard days, I look at my friends who work in an office or work for somebody else and who are texting constantly all day long because they're sitting at their desk bored or don't want to do their work or whatever, and think, man, every once in a while, I think, wouldn't it be cool to have a 401k and 5 p.m. put down the computer, walk away, don't worry about it.
And when I say that, people think I've lost my mind. Because I've said it, and I get all these messages that are like, you're living my dream. How could you ever think about quitting? All this stuff. And it's like, this is a job that has good things and bad things, just like any other job. It's also an indicator and I'm not going to name any names out of privacy, but people are leaving this field. And I could name 5 or 6 people that I know just in close circles that are I think I'm going to get a full-time job.
Yep.
I think I'm done. And people that I had considered to be super established or successful want to scale back or want to leave or want to maybe work in ceramics but work for like an institution or something, because it's a grind. I know there are a lot of people that are hungry to take their spots, which is like great. It's like some cycle that's happening, but it's also scary. It's scary to see people that you're friends with that are like, I don't think I can do this anymore.
I mean, we don't have to name names because I can own up that I have that, I would say like once every 3 years, roughly. And I've been self-employed for 13. So
Right.
that's at least 4 times now that I've gone so far as I was like 5 years in business and I did get a job and I got it.
Yeah.
This is where you're going to appreciate the level of insanity that this was. I got it in the summer when I was a full-time wedding photographer. So literally like the worst possible, like it's one thing if I were to go get a seasonal part-time, like full-time gig in like January,
Right.
but I was working 40 hours a week, downtown Chicago, commuting every day, coming back home, shooting weddings, processing images, doing all of the things. And I was 5 years into business. But it was just like I don't know, I had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted healthcare benefits. I wanted all of the
You
things.
just get tired. It's just a hard job. I said in the beginning, this job is just, you need a little bit of like that naivete or whatever to do it. Because shit, if you knew how hard it was, I don't think people would do it. And I mean, it's beautiful that people still do, right? It like tells you how amazing the actual thing can be if you can make it. And it doesn't chew you out.
Well, let's be a little pragmatic and just give everybody an idea of, because we've alluded to staff, we've alluded to assistants. So in a week at Not Work Related, what does your schedule and what does the amount of help and kind of the scope of what the studio, capital T, capital S, actually look like for you guys right now?
So right now I have 3 people that work part-time because nobody can afford to live off of Not Work Related. I can barely afford to live on Not Work Related. I wish in a dream world it would be with the same person, right? It would be one skill set that is able to come in, every other day or whatever. The reality is in New York City, you just can't live off of this. And I think I pay well. I think I pay as much as I possibly can because I know it's a hard job. But I have help all day Monday, like 10 to 6. And then I have help Tuesday, Thursday. And then a friend of mine comes in Saturday for like half a day. So I have at the end of the week, like 3.5 days of help. And then I'm probably putting in, I'm putting in a full like Monday through Friday. I usually teach Wednesday nights at the studio, like my own studio, a little like wheel for fun date night class. And then Saturday is usually, a 3/4 day. And Sunday is, I don't know. It's a day. Usually work happens. The thing that really pushes it over is that I bring stuff home every night. Whether that's physical stuff, like a lot of the masking work happens at home, which I don't think people know, or a lot of the admin digital stuff happens. And I think people have this idea that like I run a design studio. Obviously, we already know that everyone thinks I run a design studio, but I can't design in the studio. Nothing ever has been designed in that studio. And it's a beautiful studio and it's clean. Everyone that works for me is actually fairly organized and a little bit anal about keeping things clean. I can't work there. There are so many distractions. There are so many things that need to happen all the time. And every time I walk into that studio, I feel like I have a timer started. I mean, I have a literal timer started, but I feel like there's a countdown clock to end of the day. And I can't design like that. So all the design work, I'm sure people will be surprised to hear, happens like more at night. It happens even after like my boyfriend goes to bed. I need like AirPods, dark, quiet, focus. And that's the only time that I can do that type of work. So as much as it maybe is or is not a design studio, like this design does not happen there. And it's probably less than 40 or 60 hours in total for the whole year.
Sure.
Compared to how much time we're spending doing production.
When you think about the hours you put in creating those designs, is that I'm making the assumption that there's also a certain amount that's kind of percolating in the back of your head. As you're producing something, you're like, oh, okay, next time we could do this differently. It would take less time. Or I have this really cool idea, which will take 3 times the amount of time, but I want to do it anyway.
Right.
Like, I'm sure there's untrackable time that's kind of happening just
But
constantly.
like, even when you're taking a shower and you're like, oh, next time I do this, I should do that, right? And so part of the curse of like, my partner is also, he's a designer, he's a graphic designer, he runs a studio. And so what happens undeniably is you go back and forth, right, about critiquing each other's work, or like, I mean, he'll go as far to say like, don't make any more of those. Like, you know what I mean? Because we both speak the same language, and I'm sure the same happens with you, especially as the lines blur, it doesn't really stop because you're still having conversations. Hey, take a look at this. What do you think about that? And yeah, it's like a nonstop thing. But I don't know how to quantify that time, right? I try to keep track of all those hours, but like at the end of the day, yeah, a lot of it is just going on in the back of your head. And I think that people also imagine design as like a moment of inspiration. And it's not that. Like, you roll out of bed and you're like, oh, I dreamt this thing. It ain't like that. It's like the first time you make it, it's going to be a little ugly. And then the next time you make it, it might get a little better. And then the fourth time you make it might be a year later, which is truly how some stuff has worked out. And then it's like, oh, this is so cool.
And then that's what you see in the Instagram reel.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so I think people think, one, it happens like that. And two, I think people think it's like a moment of inspiration. And it's a lot of times for me, it's forced. A lot of times it is like, I need a new mug design. Sit down here until we figure it out. And I know a lot of people want to ask about like creative process and stuff. And it's like, it's so unique to every single person that I could never give somebody a formula. Like, if you're inspired by nature, then your inspiration is probably going for a walk. Whereas mine is like blasting music on my AirPods and sitting in the dark in the middle of the night on a computer. But I would say like collecting inspiration, and not like 2 things, but like 20 things. And then taking those things and figuring out what properties you like about those things, writing those down, and then putting all the inspiration away. Put it away, don't look at it, don't draw from it, close all those tabs, put your phone away that has all the photos of leaves or whatever on it, and then work. Because the idea, right, is to make something that other people are not necessarily making. And if you're hopefully not getting inspiration from other people doing ceramics and you're like going beyond that, even if it's photos of water droplets, like, I don't care what it is, put them all away and then make your thing. So you are hopefully going towards the qualities that you like without creating just another version of that thing. And it's something that has been really important to me, because I'm gonna say the thing that like I'm sure everyone has thought, but the trends that roll through Instagram are so terrifying to me. Like, whoever made the boob mug, I'm so sorry. Whoever did checkers 4 years ago, I am so sorry, because it's so pervasive. When something gets picked up, it rolls so fast. And I think it's twofold for me. One, I don't ever want not work related to be trendy. Like, I'm cool staying at the scale I am at. I'm cool even just selling on the sidewalk. Like, I don't want my thing that I've worked so hard on to get picked up and keep rolling down the hill, getting bigger and bigger. So it's like a genuine fear. But I think at the same time, it also pushes me so hard in an unhealthy way to always keep making new things, to be one step ahead, to be like, I don't care, I don't need that next. And I don't know if I'll ever feel like super secure to the point where I don't feel like I have to do that, where I don't feel like I have to be better, faster, stronger. Yeah, I don't know what the point is, but like, people don't talk about it, but they know it happens.
And I was actually just talking to another potter, just like in DMs on Instagram, about plagiarism and about where is that line between inspiration and a hobby potter trying to just learn, who admires something going, oh, cool, can I figure that out? How do I do that? Versus straight up stealing an idea and getting recognition from it, whether that was malicious or not. Because I think a lot of it is not done maliciously. I think a lot of it is done out of excitement. But, we have to all acknowledge where something comes from and I'm stumbling around with this because I'm also thinking in the back of my head, like when I first got into photography, 100%, I can tell you the iterations of my own photographic style that came from specific people, right? That I was looking at Bob Davis's work and saying, okay, he clearly knows what he's doing with flash. Let me learn that. Let me be able to make a photo like Bob does. But then by the time I was doing that, going, okay, well, this is how he does it. Now let me put my spin on it. Let me take it and change it somehow. And I think it's that second part that gets lost in the desire to go viral, in the desire to gain popularity, in the desire to sell stuff and manage to make a living from this thing.
I think it goes even one step further, like the reason why it's bad and the reason why trends are bad. And it's not just in ceramics. Trends have happened in like fashion and everything for so long is like what happens is, right, 5 people make it. And then once you see 5 people make it, you're like, oh, I can make it. Everyone makes that, right? Nobody owns it. So then 10 more people make it, 20 people make it. And then someone like West Elm comes through and you're like, wait, that's my thing. I mean, it happened to me where they contacted me to make work for them. And then I sent an email back being like, why would you ask me to make stuff for you? Look at this stuff on the site that looks really similar to my work. And it's like 4 for $40. So how can you sell both my work and this like kind of knockoff-ish work at the same time? And then they were like, oh no, this is from a mood board of several potters. And it's like, oh, okay. So what you're saying is if you can pull 20 people that make the same thing, then you don't have to credit anybody.
Exactly.
And you can just say it's a, ceramics trend, it's a pottery trend, and we're just making stuff on that trend and we're not taking it from anybody. It just like you lose all of that collective power that we have as like small businesses or artists or whatever, because it just becomes something that you can consumerize. You know what I mean? That's when it gets like super scary, because then you also lose your power to fight back on it.
No, that just took it to a place I never even thought about.
Oh, welcome to my world, man. It's just like worst case scenario all the time.
Because with photography, I just gave up, frankly. With photography, it was like, look, I'm going to put my photos on the internet, and I know full well when I do that, they're going to get stolen. And I just kind of moved on. I didn't want to use up energy towards tracking that down every day, because I just don't have that much time in the day to do that. But the act of taking a picture but I'm still getting paid by someone who hired me in the first place to make that picture, right? Like, so the transaction has happened by the time that photo is on the internet, as opposed to sharing your work, hoping that then that gets sold later on. That's a totally different process.
It's a scary thing now because I think we're pushed. I know a lot of people hate Instagram and like, I don't even want to touch that. But on top of that, we're making content to try to, it's beautiful in some way. You're able to communicate so much more about your work when you're not just throwing out photos and writing a paragraph, right? So like we have this ability to connect to people, connect to our consumers, grow, all of that. The scary part is that for a lot of us, we're giving away more than we've ever given away before. And I don't know what that's going to lead to, but every time I post a video, I'm so conscious of how much of the process I'm showing. And there are parts of the process that never get shown and maybe will never get shown because I'm just not secure enough. And that's like a me thing. Like, I'm not saying anyone's coming after me in any way. I'm just saying like right now, I don't feel comfortable enough. And that's like a boundary that I have where I already feel nervous putting videos out about process. And I don't know where that boundary will be. For every single person, it'll be different. The part that makes me second guess that action of putting the content out there is because I mentioned this to you before, but every time I post a video, I get inundated with either DMs, messages, whatever, comments that are double checking my process. Like, hey, I just want to make sure you did this and then you did that, right? Or like someone commented recently that I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. And it was like, no, but hold on, what? Like, I just wanted to share my work. And then always get like, what glaze recipe is that? What kind of tape is that? How are you masking that? Is that slip? Is that stain? And I genuinely am going to, because I've been super honest so far, I won't answer it, right? Because if it's someone I know, if it's a person I'm friends with, super open. And I'm transparent about some things like very publicly about the studio, but I've shared glaze recipes, I've received glaze recipes, I've troubleshot stuff behind the scenes with friends. But when it's a stranger asking you how you did your thing, that line starts to blur so much where it's like, I think it's because Instagram has been built currently on like the back of influencers. And so you're used to like I mentioned to you, like, you're used to being like, where's that bag from? Where are those glasses from? And someone will tell you because they either rep that brand or they have an affiliate link, or it doesn't do anything for them if those glasses get sold out, whatever. And then, on the next level, there's also a lot of ceramic educators, people that use Instagram as a place to teach and a place to like share knowledge. But I would bet you so much money that 8 to 9 out of 10 of those people have another source of income. So when people are running those teaching Instagrams, or people are producing content that's like trying different styles, or like, watch me do this, I bet you so much money that if they had to live off of that work that they are making, they would not feel as comfortable handing it out for free. Like paid workshops, teaching in a university, like all cool. But the handing it out for free it's really difficult when you run a business and you need that business to exist, not only this year, but like in 5 years and like in 20 years, and that you don't know what it's going to look like at 65, right? Like we don't have a trajectory that we can look at and be like, this is my path. I know that there's this many people that have done this in this way. We're just making it up. And while Instagram is this like beautiful tool, it's also been, for me personally, like a scary tool where I'm always second guessing how much to put out. And I know I could put out way more and the account would grow more. But then I feel like I'm also setting myself up for, I don't know, risks that I'm not ready to fight. I don't know how if that like comes together. I would say like, if you want to slide in someone's DM and ask them, what is this? What is that? You never know if they're going to say yes, no, hi, bye, whatever. You're more than welcome to do it, but just don't be offended when someone doesn't answer, because you're asking them for knowledge for free. And like, I don't have a teaching account. I run a business. If you're not going to slide into someone's DMs and be like, can you tell me what Lightroom settings you're using for these photos? Like, if you wouldn't do that and you wouldn't go into a restaurant and be like, can I have this recipe? Why would you come up to me and be like, hey, can you tell me how you're making that? This is what I think you're doing. Is that right? It's my right to share it if I want to share it. If I don't want to share it, secret sauce, like, let it be.
And I think I think there's a loss of respect there. There's the expectation that everyone's going to share, that for the people that do want to share it, that's fine. Go for it. There's a certain amount of photography education I share for free on Instagram. But let's not kid ourselves. I also do that to prove that I know what I'm talking about, in the hopes that you'll want to come pay for a class with me. I don't think that should be shocking to anybody for me to share that. I'm very transparent about the fact that, like, we're both self-employed. This is the only way we keep the lights on. Like, it'd be a different situation if, there was some secret bazillionaire uncle somewhere funding our hopes and dreams. But I think the point being, like, there isn't a fixed right or wrong, good or bad. Like, each maker is going to choose where they're comfortable to live in the internet space, and the other people consuming their content, there just has to be a mutual respect of, like, I appreciate what you're putting out there. And if you don't want to, so-and-so might answer yes to a question that somebody else might answer no. And that's fine, because we're all completely different individuals with completely different needs and completely different boundaries. And boundaries are good.
Yeah. And if somebody doesn't answer, you just have to know when you're asking that person, they might not answer. And I'm telling you right now, straight, I probably won't answer. And then if you message me about something else, I'll probably answer that thing. Like, if you comment on a whatever, and like, it's not personal. It's just preservation, right? I'm trying to preserve my income, because if the thing that pays my bills can no longer pay my bills, then like, where am I? And I took a huge risk. I think a lot of people take a huge risk when they go out on their own. The reason I made the switch was, at the moment I was like, I can always go back to architecture. They're always going to be there. And it's like, yes. But also now when I go back, I'm going to be back at like a junior level. And all of my friends are now like project architects. I'm going to be working with like the 22-year-olds. And you know what I mean? Like, it's not as viable as I thought. I thought, oh, I can always go back. That industry is always going to be there. My degree is always going to be there. My portfolio is always going to be there. In reality, it's not going to be as hard for me to go back. And if I got another job, and if I ever killed not work related, it would probably actually be in ceramics. it would probably be working for like a manufacturer or working for, you know what I mean? Instead, because that's where all my knowledge is now. It's not that I'm opposed to teaching in any way. Like actually, I hope to, I think it's in April, end of April, and be going out to university and doing like a visiting artist demo and talk and all that. And so I'm not trying to be like I'm burying all my secrets or whatever in the ground. It's just Instagram is not the place for me personally to like share that stuff. And it's just a hard boundary, mostly because of preservation and insecurity. I'll say it.
But I think we have to normalize that. You know what I mean? I think we have to normalize. I see a lot of artists talking about boundaries and talking about, and it's interesting because I see it also potentially going the other way, where people feel insecure around telling people no. Like there's a nervousness around not sharing because of the backlash from that. I think it goes in both directions, and we just have to make it okay. Boundaries are healthy and everybody's going to find their own way with that. And that the people asking the questions, I mean, the common thread that I see through both sides of that from people that I've heard from is it's when it's like full-fledged strangers, random messages, asking about a deep dive on a process, when it's like, if you have some kind of relationship, if we've engaged together on some level,
problem.
It changes the game. But it's that very...
It's when someone doesn't follow you and then they just comment on your posts and be like, what tape is that? And it's like, you don't even follow me. Like, are you serious? And I think that mentality is a huge shift. Once it's the thing that puts food on your table, you will want to protect it with your life, because it's also like a huge part of you that you did on your own. You made up this system, this process, this work, and people ask so much about style and like where that comes from. And it's like, style is just a combination of like a lot of work over a lot of time. And if it's produced by the same person, I would bet you that it will feel like it's made by the same person. Like, I remember when I used to set up at markets. Sorry, I feel like I've already veered off. But I used to set up at markets and be so self-conscious that it looked like I was jumping around all over the place. Like, it didn't feel cohesive. It took several years for me to be like, oh, I filled in all the blanks. Like, it is starting to feel like the same person made all this stuff. And there was no amount of me like trying to force myself into a style or an aesthetic that would have gotten me there. It was really just like, keep making work, keep editing that work. And over a span of years, you will start to feel like you've honed in on like an aesthetic or a style. And once you have that aesthetic or style, then you can make decisions based off that aesthetic and style. And then also accept that that is going to change. Yeah. And it won't always be, you know, this like thing that holds you.
Which is the funny thing about when all of us are trying to shortcut that process, right? Of asking another maker, how did you do this? What material is that? Where did you get that? And it's funny because we're trying to short circuit the process or shortcut or whatever the metaphor I'm looking for here is. And at the same time, the actual answer to the questions that come after that, the questions of style and growing and finding your voice, are the very nature of the iterative process that you're trying to skip past.
Right. Like, you won't get anything. I don't think you will get anything good if you don't give yourself that time. And I think the best part is like look back to this shit I made in 2018. Some of it's not that good. Like, being able to constantly look back and be like, oh, I grew a lot. I look back to when I first got this particular studio space in 2020, and there's photos of like the wall before a drop or whatever. And I'm like, holy shit. Compare that to now, 2 years later, December 2020 and December 2022, the amount of work that has been produced and changed, and like how much clearer the vision looks for not work. It's the same techniques, the same style, the same person. It just had more time. It just had more time to like do it over and over and over again. And once I quit, I got laid off. Once I got laid off from my freelance job, the amount of time I had to do these things like expanded greatly. So then I got better at it. And it's the same for anyone that works for me. Like, making work in someone else's hand or vision is the weirdest thing in the world. But when someone looks back at their handles that they made when they started versus like a year from them, and they're like, oh my God, those were so shitty. And it's like, yeah, but you did them. You did like like for someone that's working on the side, maybe they make, 10 mugs a month or 20 mugs a month or something. If you ever like worked for me, you could be doing 200 handles in the span of a couple weeks. And so you're going to get that practice. And I don't know. I think there's no shortcutting to that stuff.
That brings me back to the metaphor that people are going to like roll their eyes at because they've heard me say this before. But what I find so prevalent is I'm trying to figure out a nice way to put this, like to soften it, and there isn't a way. But the need for self-discipline to sit down and do the same thing over and over again. Like a lot of people, Francesco and I have this conversation with people a lot since he very happily identifies as a production potter. And a lot of people are like, oh God, no, I never want to do that. And it's like, well, whether you want to make the same mug 190 times or not isn't the point. The point is to practice in that way, to have that skill. I am not a full-time potter. I am not a production potter. But when I was starting at the community studio, I started playing in that way because it was like, well, if I sit down and try to make the same bowl over and over again, every time I learn something new, every time I get better at the skill because I'm doing the same thing and learning like, oh, I'm leaving a little bit too much clay right here. Oh, this is how I get that curve to move in that way. If I was making disparate random shapes and forms and whatever in a 3-hour chunk of time, like, what do I know about my skills? How am I going to get, I don't know. I think it comes from learning an instrument.
That leads to like why I don't do commissions, right? Because if I'm doing a commission to whatever it is, we all know it's not going to be solid glaze, simple things because nobody buys that from me. I tried a long time ago, actually. I tried to do like a Renegade and like bring like a little pile of like solid colored things. No one wanted that. Not one person wanted that from me. So I gave up on it a long time ago. I stopped kind of doing commission work. I did one earlier in this year and it was actually like last year, 2022. And it was like one of the hardest things. It ruined my whole year. I felt the ricochet of that project until December. Until the last drop of the year, I felt I was like 2 weeks behind. Trying to push in the amount of work I would have had and the amount of income I would have had if I didn't take that commission on. But I don't do it anymore because one, the type of work I do has like such a high rate of seconds. But two, because exactly what you said, when you're making something for the first time and something is custom for a person, the first 20 times you do it, you're still learning from that process. And so you need to build in time to like learn how to produce the thing that you're producing. By that time, you're late.
Or they're not going to, or the quote you should have given for, hey, I need to make 20 iterations of this to get you 3 of them, I mean, maybe some people might say yes. Like
people do.
David Kim has it figured out somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Totally. For me personally, it's really hard because it takes several times of doing a design and even sometimes me and like an assistant doing that thing before we find the little things that are like, oh, this tool is better. That thing is, I can't do it for commissions. So.
Oh, man. Sarah, I could keep going. I am very conscious of the fact that I have taken twice as much of your time. We could just keep going because I also feel like our brains kind of think so similarly to where I'm just like, yes, let's go.
Which is funny because I think our approaches to ceramics are very different, like to pottery. Like, I think what we find joy in is maybe different. And then also what we think of as like our business models. I've heard you talk about like how you like wholesaling, like having a single client and all of that. And it's like the thing I hate the most.
And you're like, dear God, no.
No, right? So that's it's so interesting that we can have these conversations, but then also be on like completely opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of how we would run our own business models, studios.
And maybe that's what I'm hoping people will take with them is I think everybody's always, they're coming into your DMs, they're asking online, I see it everywhere. They're trying to find that quote unquote right answer. And it's like there are so many different ways you can do this and you just have to figure out what works for you and what works for the life that you want.
The place you live, the work you want to make, all of it. And nobody's system is going to work for the other.
No, because I'm always trying to convince you of this.
Yeah. And I'm like, that sounds horrible.
Absolutely not.
But then if I try to convince someone else of the system that I have, people would think that's horrible. Like, I think people think it's stupid, right? It's stupid that I don't have work available for sale ever. In a year, I think I have work available for sale for less than an hour.
Yeah, because you've got 6 drops and they go in like...
Less than 10 minutes? Yeah, less than 10 minutes. And it's like, okay, so now we have less than an hour where you can buy work. And to make a paycheck pay 3 people, part-time on a shop that is only open for 1 goddamn hour a year and then you add on top of that, the only way that you can buy that stuff is like if you sign up for the email and you get that email, you copy that password and you're there on time, which I think everybody would tell you not to do. And yet it's what we do and it's what has worked for this work.
Yep.
So there is like no right answer. And what I like might burn someone else out and what someone else likes might burn me out. Not to say I'm not burnt out, but like, you know what I mean? It just...
Yeah. Totally. I love it. Well, this feels like a stupid question to ask because I think most people know where to find you on the internet. But in case they don't, where do you want to send them?
So the studio is called Not Work Related. It was made when I had a full-time job.
It is funny now.
Yeah. At that place, everyone was really stuffy. Everyone wore like all black dress pants, dress shoes. And I was like, the material library was just like Carrara marble and black and white tile. And I felt really suffocated by it. And so this whole thing was born out of a desire to be not work related, to be the thing that was like the counterpoint to the office. So you can find me at Not Work Related on Instagram. And then there's a link to website and all that stuff there.
Sweet. And I will link it in the show notes. And that wraps up episode 333 here on the Maker's Playbook podcast. I mentioned this just briefly, but to reiterate in case you stepped away from the room earlier, since I know you're all listening while you're working away in your own studio spaces or hopefully paying more attention to driving than to my voice, I hope what anyone listening to not only this episode, but this entire podcast in general, I hope what you take away is that there is no single right answer. There is no one right way to start a business. Someone telling you otherwise is probably just selling you something. There is no sure solution that will save you from failure or heartbreak. Honestly, the complexity and nuance required to sort through so many of these questions I see new makers asking online. Should I do a shop update and drops, or should I always have inventory available? Should I sell on Etsy or my own website? How many times a week do I have to post to Instagram? All of these never-ending questions. You know what I'm about to say. It's exactly why I wanted to create the community that we now have. I know plenty of people will think that this is just another sales pitch for our membership platform. And yes, it is a paid platform because it does take time and resources to create this podcast, which is what your membership supports. But it is also so much more than that. I couldn't have sorted through all of the complexity of starting a business or even a side hustle, frankly, without support from colleagues. Whether you decide to come join us specifically over inside of the community, or if you are finding your own local support group of makers, no matter what, I hope you find your people that understand on a guttural level what it feels like to put something that you've put your heart and soul into making and then putting it into the mail and praying the postal service professionals take very gentle care of it. If you are looking for support and help navigating all of these questions, I would love it if you come check out our special little slice of the internet. You can learn more at makersplaybook.com/community. And if you visited that website before, you might want to come back over to that link, makersplaybook.com/community, once again, because I have just totally revamped it. As I just mentioned, it does take a fair amount of work to put together this podcast, which I absolutely love doing, but I can keep doing it along with supporting a couple of other independent artists in the process, thanks to not only the members inside of the community, but also thanks to our sponsor, Amico.
Hello, I'm Jeff, Executive Vice President here at Amoco Brent. Over 100 years ago, my grandfather founded Amoco. Today, my brother and I carry on his legacy. Our team works diligently to bring you the best clays, glazes, equipment, and more for your studio and classroom. This week's episode is brought to you by Amoco Brent. Please find your favorite Amoco or Brent product at your local distributor today. Thank you for choosing Amoco for all your clay and glaze needs.
Additionally, audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotsovan with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.